President Obama versus the Islamic State, the Ray Rice situation, the 9/11 anniversary, and immigration. I'm Nan Khan, and this is The Square Circle. Welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Nan Khan. Joining us today are political consultant Marcio Coimbra, Al Matei of topofthecircle.com, Democratic consultant Matthews Pearson, and Nick Zayas of Young Voices Advocates. Welcome, everybody. This week, President Obama addressed the nation to make his case for a military offense against a terrorist group calling itself the Islamic State. The president claims that the Islamic State presents a threat to national security, while at the same time trying to reassure the American people that the offensive would not become another quagmire. Al Matei, was the president's case persuasive?
This was actually one of the easiest wartime political speeches that could have been made, because the president didn't need to do very much persuading. The persuasion was actually done by the Islamic State people when they showed video around the world of the murders of James Foley and Steven Sotloff. Once they did that, all of a sudden something very interesting happened. People started to get some gumption in Washington, D.C. Poll numbers have shown that Americans are leaning towards airstrikes, and as opposed to a year ago when the U.S. House of Representatives was so skittish about sending any sort of aid to people in Syria, right now it looks like they'll actually will fall in line with the president and present a unified front against these people, because ISIL or ISIS or Islamic State, however you decide to say it, no matter what flavor you give it, they're bad actors.
Nick, what do you think about that?
I think that makes the case for this war is dubious at best. There's a lot of populist swelling of opinion. The polling has been really, really supportive of going to war with this entity, whatever you may call it. But the goals are kind of dubious. Whether we can actually do anything is just as conflicted. No one actually really knows whether these airstrikes will do anything on the ground, produce any measurable outcomes. And what matters for the American people is actual outcomes for public safety. And if we're doing this, does this make us any safer? That question is still up for debate.
Does anyone think the president didn't make his case?
I think the president made his case. I don't think he had much need to make his case, as Al said. This is a slam dunk. Whatever you want to call them, I'm not going to go through all the acronyms. They're, as you said, bad actors. They've done horrible things. They will continue to do horrible things. And while airstrikes are not panacea, airstrikes will have already driven them back. They've already killed large numbers of fighters. And as you've seen in other places in the world, in Yemen, in the Islamic Maghreb, these organizations, when they're allowed to operate in free space with the mass Toyota tactics, they do very well. They take over large swaths of territory. They overwhelm national governments and armies, and the only thing that can stop them is Western air power. The French did this in Mali to great success. We will do it in Iraq, and it appears now over the border in Syria to what I'm sure will also be great success. The president's point about destroying them, that is a higher bar. We don't know where his definition is, if he's using the military definition or if he's taking them off of our radar as a public. But airstrikes can't do that, but the airstrikes are the right thing to do. Airstrikes will seriously degrade their ability to act. and they will protect Americans in Iraq, Americans in the region, and the Iraqis and many other people. And our NATO allies. Don't forget that Turkey is on the border with them, and I would rather not get to the point where we are invoking Article 5 against a non-state actor as we did in 2001.
Thanks. I'd like to remind our audience that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. The other major story this week was the new video of the Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice knocking out his then-fiancee. The NFL and the Ravens levied additional punishments on Rice in light of the video, but now public indignation has turned against team officials and especially NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. Marcio Coimbra, are there any heads that should roll as a result of this situation?
Many heads are going to roll, of course, because here we're talking about a case of domestic violence, and that's it. And somebody was this was being hidden from the public, and TMZ, when they put their video, it shocked everybody. But there is something that this case brought to light that we need to discuss. This is football. This is NFL.
Sure.
Are they above the law? I mean, it's not the first case of domestic violence in the NFL. I mean, we had another cases, Ray McDonald, for example, for the San Francisco 49ers. And I think that something have to be done. For example,
So what do you think about the commissioner? Whose head should roll in light of the situation? Did they see the video before they actually...
Of course their heads should roll, but we're talking about huge amount of money here. This is a sport that deals with big contracts, powerful people, and I mean, just the public can do something, because we don't see that the NFL is really in control of that, because they keep the players very, very, very well safe above the law, and nobody's being punished. We see for example, other players that were involved with marijuana, like Josh Gordon, and they have, huge disciplinary actions against them. But in case of domestic violence, we don't see the same heavy hand. So
should we start with Commissioner Goodell?
I think that should be the first one, but we should think, and we should realize, and we should ask ourselves if he's going to be the first one, if there are going to be heads that are going to roll. They should, but are they going to roll? That's the case.
Anybody else?
Well, let me tell you this much. I really popped the popcorn and waited for 5 o'clock on Monday when Keith Olbermann made a wonderful 6.5-minute rant asking for 9 people to resign. And this not only included Commissioner Roger Goodell, this included people in NFL security, people from the Baltimore Ravens, and including a judge and 2 prosecutors in Atlantic County, New Jersey. You can argue that this is just this enormous, there's actually an enormous structural problem here, because the National Football League operates differently from other sports leagues, not only in the United States but around the world. They're not separate disciplinary committees like there are in Major League Soccer or in the National Hockey League, or inquiry committees in the English Premier League. It is the commissioner that is the final arbiter of anything that has to do with discipline. There isn't a real disciplinary committee. Furthermore, when it comes to the governance of casinos in Atlantic City, think about the casino floor. It is watched 24/7 by the New Jersey State Police. Anything else within a casino is looked after by the Atlantic City Police Department. Somebody within the Revel Casino, which is actually the first head to roll because it closed on September 4th, somebody in that casino had the tape and didn't give it to the right people, whether it was the Atlantic City Police Department or whether it was, or maybe even the NFL office. Even though the AP says that the original in the elevator tape was given to the NFL, we're not 100% sure about that because we actually don't have the corroborating proof that the secretary on that 12-second alleged call said, oh, it's bad. Well, we don't know which video that they were talking about.
Interesting. So we're going to bring the casino into this. I haven't heard much on
Yes.
that.
Oh, my goodness. The casino, we have to realize, the casino is a $2 billion waste of money. It was something which was going to be the second largest building in the state of New Jersey. It was going to be not a hotel first, a casino second, with family and so forth. There wasn't going to be any sort of gamblers club within it, and the business model failed miserably, of course, in the end. But one thing that happened structurally was that there were not enough security people looking at the video of the people in the elevators. There should have been, the moment that Ray Rice threw that left hook into Janae Palmer, there should have been officers at each and every landing ready to basically say, hey, what's going on? You didn't need to do this. And this is something for the Atlantic City Police Department, but it wasn't done.
Okay. So, turning back to national security, this week the nation observed the 13th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Naturally, there was a major turn toward homeland security following the attacks, and opposing concerns about personal liberty have taken a back seat. Nick Zayas, has this turn toward securing the homeland been an overreaction? Has our civil liberties suffered over the past 13 years?
For the past 13 years, it's been a dark time for civil liberties in America. No other events, other than possibly the drug war, have eroded civil liberties so much as the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And it does not take much to look around to go and see this. Walk into any airport and you will see the Transportation Security Administration has spent billions of dollars for minimal, if any, security gains, according to studies from across the political spectrum. Body scanners were a boondoggle beyond belief that they increased security lines with effectively no measurable outcomes. The GSA has also been involved with behavioral screening, which has been shown in numerous studies that to be completely ineffective in America. There was a great study by J. Stuart Mendenhall published in Regulation 2 years ago that says exactly that. Then there are any number of other erosions of civil liberties, be it Customs and Border Patrol, be it any other agency within DHS, which in itself has been a civil liberty eroding boondoggle in its creation.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Nick, when it came to the behavioral screening, because I actually thought that was going to be the next iteration, did they analyze it versus what they do in Israel? Because apparently it's actually been pretty effective there.
I really have not looked at that, but what I know is in the U.S. iteration of this, it is produced minimal, if any, security gains and does not pass cost-benefit analysis.
There's one thing. There's one thing that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There's one thing I'd like to add about what that I read about in last weekend's Washington Post. There was a story about a Caucasian male with his two daughters who are from China, and a Homeland Security agent stationed in out-of-the-way Cape May, New Jersey, just this little tiny resort with a few thousand people, was watching them, was spying on them because of concerns about human trafficking. I mean, if you're going to have domestic spying in our country, thanks, friends, but I want my 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendments back.
Well, I think you bring a great point in this, and that Department of Homeland Security as a body has done a lot to erode our civil liberties. They've also done a lot to keep us safe. the Patriot Act has done a lot to promote our civil liberties, and it's done a lot to keep us safe. But I think a bigger issue you speak to is the pervasive notion of amongst the public and law enforcement as a whole that has not a basis in law, but is in a matter of opinion of your free will, your rights mean less than my ability as law enforcement to do whatever my will is. And we're seeing that in the tracking of people, in plenty of things that aren't backed law. The militarization of police is a program that is, gives people equipment, but it doesn't give them. There's no law saying law enforcement should now conduct hundreds and thousands of SWAT team raids that do very little to upgrade our safety. So I think it's less in a matter of law and more in a mentality, and especially in the law enforcement community and in large swaths of America that are not in law enforcement, that if it is perceived you are doing something wrong, or if law enforcement says you are doing something wrong, then you must be doing something wrong and you must submit entirely. And that's the end of it. I'm not going to say until you're proven innocent or guilty. That's just, you must submit, and period.
Wow.
And that's, I think, the greater problem.
So my question is, did the terrorists, did they achieve their goal? They changed the way we live in America. If they did, their goal was not just to kill people on 9/11. Their goal was to change the way we live.
The terrorist goal, though, was to change the way we live, but it wasn't to make us have a pervasive security state. Their goal was to advance their cause and create a caliphate. So they've, besides this new group with their little itty-bitty fake stake, the terrorists have failed miserably in their goal. I want to be clear about that. I'm no great, right-wing, beef up everything in security, and the only reason we haven't had a terrorist attack is because of all these things. But all those things are very important, and the terrorists are failing and will continue to fail with our continued pressure on them and our continued measures here at home.
So is anyone in favor of Homeland Security pulling back?
Absolutely. I personally advocate for the breaking up of the Department of Homeland Security into its constituent agencies and then being parceled out. TSA can easily be folded back into FAA. There are plenty of very, very basic security gains where you can strip out the waste, you can strip out the programs that just simply do not pass cost-benefit analysis. You can actually do studies on these things. They know down to the percentage how much a given program adds to the security of, say, in some cases, airline passengers. And it is not, it's very difficult to do, but there are people who can do it.
Unfortunately, the American people want security past the point of diminishing returns. Cost benefit is great, but if you say it's going to cost this much and we only get this much security, American people are still going to say it's that much.
Yeah, the American people want security. I understand that, but also if we keep changing and keep making mistakes in our foreign policy, attacking countries like we did with Libya, the way we did, creating safe harbors for terrorists, there is no TSA that's going to prevent a terrorist attack if we're creating terrorist camps in Libya like we did, or like we're maybe doing in Syria, or like we did in Iraq. More than that, we should look for our foreign policy, to make a foreign policy that works and that not create hate against America. That's much more important than a Department of Homeland Security. If we keep failing abroad, we're going to keep needing more and more state, more and more security, more and more Homeland Security. I think we need to go on the source of the problem and not just acting home to prevent terrorist attacks. Of course we should. Our agencies are important, but they are growing. There are 16 intelligence agencies in the United States. If there is 16 intelligence agencies in the United States, it's because there is a risk. If there is a risk, this risk comes from something that happened in the past. I mean, we were the most loved country in the 50s in the Middle East. What happened?
Thanks, Marcio. Finally, late last week, President Obama announced that he will delay any executive action on immigration until after the November elections. He said that doing so will keep the issue from being politicized during election season. The president has been taking the heat on all sides. Immigration advocates have accused him of breaking, or at least delaying, another promise, while Obama's critics have noted that the delay indicates that such a move would be unpopular to begin with. Matthews Pearson, was this a politically calculated move, and is it necessarily a bad thing?
All moves are politically calculated, so the idea that one isn't is ridiculous. This was the right move. Congress wasn't going to move on it. Congress was going to have, we have the paltry figure from the Republican House, which the Tea Party members are even upset about that much. The Senate wasn't going to be able to do anything that was going to help. It would only inflame matters more. For the president to push this off to either the lame duck or next year is the right thing to do. And then the people who will attack him are the people who would rather get a say in this come next year. So they get to have everything they want as well. So for them to say this is a calculated political move to help Democrats, they're getting everything out of it too. So it's in terms of politics, it's fairly neutral. In terms of the actual situation, we weren't going to get anywhere with it anyway. An executive action could have been counterproductive. It would have created uncertainty with the new Congress coming in. It would have elevated the issue and to a level which is already beyond the stratospheric level we're at, where people can't possibly see compromise or have a comprehensive immigration bill. So letting things ride, the numbers are down a little bit. Maybe we can bring this pot, off the boil and let cooler heads prevail.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Wasn't it a few weeks ago when we were talking about, not we, but the focus was on this enormous children's crusade of people coming in from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador? I don't think they've stopped, at least to my knowledge. Or either that or it was completely overruled in the first place. But I'm kind of wondering if something has happened in the back channel negotiations, especially the meeting about 3 or 4 weeks ago with the presidents of those 3 countries coming here, because those are the leaders that need to prevent immigrants from leaving their countries and taking that, taking the dangerous passage through Mexico.
Well, the numbers, from what I gather, are down a small amount, but it doesn't mean they're not still huge. And you're right. There needs to be more done where they're coming from, but I don't think it's merely stopping them from coming. When people are being murdered in the street, it's not like you can just put up a fence around them. There's a root cause, just like we were talking about with terrorism. That the best way, the most cost-effective, and the most effective generally will be to address this where they are. And it's foreign policy dollars are always more effective than defense or security dollars.
I absolutely agree. There are a myriad of issues that go into violence in Central America, ranging from simply bad domestic policies that have led to stagnation of these economies to the U.S. drug war that's led to direct gang violence and spillovers coming south from Mexico, to any number of other factors that are pushing these children out of these countries. So in this case, yes, the issue is very real, but coming back to Obama, that is not, I don't think that really plays into this decision, because it's a policy neutral thing. They're just pushing this until a more politically convenient time where heads are cooler, where we can actually get somebody very real immigration reform that few people will say does not need to happen, done either in the lame duck session or in the next Congress.
Yeah, the problem is that immigration became a political issue in this country. So people are playing with immigration regarding the elections and who's going to win. I think immigration is much more than that. This is a country formed by immigrants. This is the #1 issue in this country, and it should be discussing accordingly. It should be discussed the way it should be.
So
Governor
you feel the
Bush,
delay is definitely politically calculated.
exactly. Governor Bush, he was attacked by some Republicans by saying that immigration was something that we have to deal with it, and it's much more than a political problem. He came out and he talked about it. Was the first person that I've seen doing this, and the way it should. And I hope that more and more politicians become less political. They should think less about the next election and more about the next generations and what this country, how this country was formed and where this country should get. We're not a country, I can see in America more and more people acting like in Germany, you know. We are like a pure country of pure people. No, it's a mix of. President Reagan said, "This is more about an idea than it's about a territory," and this is true. There are a lot of Americans that do not hold American passports. There are a lot of Americans that work hard in this country, and they feel like true Americans, and they pay taxes. Yes, they do pay taxes. They pay double in social security of another person. They pay taxes when they go to a CVS store. They pay taxes. Yes, they are citizens. They don't break the law, because if they break the law, they are sent home.
Yes.
So this should be less political and more about what it is. This is the future of America. This is the basis of this country. This country is about immigration. And this issue is the most important issue I think we have on our agenda.
It's a big one. All right, let's take some questions from our viewers. We have Eric Fitzgerald, who wants to know, given that terrorism against the U.S. is fueled by anti-Americanism, wouldn't military action in the Middle East make terrorist attacks more likely rather than less likely? Al.
All depends on how effective they are. I mean, the drone strikes are a way to be able to get everything that you need without putting boots on the ground. It's kind of interesting the way that the strategy has evolved over the last few years, and being able to put drones into the air, even hopefully at nighttime. But it's just that you've got. It's almost to the point where I don't know. We're going to become the drone states of America one of these days. It's just going to be the number one option nowadays.
Matthews, what were you going to say?
The questioner is right in that anti-American sentiment does drive a lot of these young men to become terrorists. And that's a problem that we need to solve with foreign policy. In the specific problem we have right now, what is fueling ISIS or ISIL is recently they went from an estimated several thousand fighters to maybe as many as 10,000 to there are now estimates of 20, 30, 40,000 fighters. That's not fueled by anti-American sentiment. That's fueled by what they've deemed a historic moment, and the best solution for that is death from above.
Okay, we have another question. This is coming from Marlene Saunders, who wants to know, exactly what is Roger Goodell guilty of that he should lose his job?
I would say, if you treat Roger Goodell as any other CEO of say a corporation that is living through a crisis, be it some crisis with your product or a crisis with your brand, as he is facing. Taken outside of the actual scenario, he has mishandled a crisis that has struck his organization. So, if there's a good case to fire Roger Goodell, it does not necessarily have to do with Ray Rice specifically. It's that he has mismanaged a critical point in his company's existence, and any other CEO who absolutely botches the response to a major crisis should lose their job. They would lose their job if this were AT&T. Goodell would be out on the street already.
Let me throw a little something on that. Goodell came in as the person who would put in a personal conduct policy for NFL players. And if said policy fails, if it fails in terms of not only the development but the execution, the buck has to stop with him. And there have been regrettably too many times, both in the Tagliabue and in the Goodell administrations, where there have been people that have done some really outstandingly bad things. Ben Roethlisberger, Pac-Man Jones. It goes far beyond even the drug and steroid abuse. It's these lifestyle and behavioral choices, dogfighting. Excuse me.
Goodell he makes $44 million a year. He has been rewarded amazingly well for the really great job he's done building the NFL's brand, making money for the owners, making money for the NFL. So he's been rewarded for the wonderful things he's done for the NFL. This overrides that all, and he should be punished for the horrible thing he's done. And
are we agreeing that he's mishandled it, or has he seen something and said that he didn't see it? So what are we?
I think it doesn't in a way matter. If he has said that he didn't see it and he saw it, he should be gone. If he didn't ever see it and it's come out, and he, back when he gave a 2-game suspension for this, and Josh Gordon was out for an entire year for a marijuana offense, that alone is enough to get him out. And people talking about public sentiment and that, he's the CEO or all those things. The NFL is a tax-exempt organization. We pay millions of dollars to taxpayers to fund their stadiums. The public, beyond our funding them buying tickets and watching games and all that, has a greater stake in the NFL. And our children look up to NFL players in a greater way than they do to a middle manager at AT&T. So Goodell, there's more at risk here, and Goodell should be gone.
So to answer Marlene, he's guilty of many things. Okay, now it's time to take on the most underreported story of the week, and who would like to start with that?
I can start with that. Yeah, the most unreported story of the week it's in Scotland. We should pay more attention to Scotland, and it's gonna be this huge referendum next week on Thursday, when they're gonna decide if they're still gonna be part of the United Kingdom or not. And the polls look pretty close. We're looking at a 49-51, sometimes a 51-49. All the leaders of all major parties traveled to Scotland this week to try to push the no vote, but the yes vote, it's in a big wave now, and maybe we're gonna see a independent Scotland, and that's gonna be a really, really tough job, because they're gonna be very, very tough negotiations with the UK. They have nuclear facilities, and Scotland, the currency, the EU, Scotland would not even be a member of the UN. So I think we should pay more attention to Scotland. We haven't seen as much as we should see in the news. This is much more important than many other things we've seen in the news this week, and we are not paying attention. Next week, I hope that we're going to do that.
Maybe we'll talk about it next week. Nick, what's your
I would say the most underreported story this week is actually out of Rhode Island. The Democratic primary of Rhode Island went to Gina Raimondo by 13 points, which is a vastly higher number than anyone was expecting. The latest polling had said 8% or so. What this actually matters about is that this was seen as a referendum on state-level pension reform for public sector workers. This election has been seen as a bellwether for whether Democrats can support public sector pension reform across the nation and not have their heads handed to them on a platter. In this case, the voters have said very clearly that public sector pension reform is an issue that Democrats can win on, and that's something we have not seen in this country thus far. This will be a rising issue moving forward as state pensions across the country enter even more red ink than they are in right now. This is a hot issue moving forward for years. We'll be fighting about this, and I think this is an issue this election might have been the one that put us over the edge. That will it will show that pension reform is something that is a bipartisan issue that everyone can agree needs to happen.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Matthews?
I'm gonna move back outside the U.S. The Scotland issue is so fascinating, and I'd talk about it for the next half an hour if I could. I'm just going nice and close by to the Caribbean. The Pan Am Post is reporting this week on the influence of China in the Caribbean, and this is not really the news of the week. This is an ongoing thing. I just noticed it again this week, but. As the U.S. is handling issues across the world and dealing with the pivot to Asia and the Middle East and figuring out what we're going to do with our partnerships in Europe, China is eating our lunch as we turn around. We are finally re-engaging in Africa with the summit and working to expand trade ties there. And then people aren't realizing that we've neglected the place right in our backyard. We had the Monroe Doctrine that said, this is all ours, and stay out of our area. And now we kind of wake up and see, wait, the Caribbean is turning to China. They're going to build a new canal to compete with the Panama Canal. They're doing public works in all these places. So American soft power, we've talked all about the hard power so far this half an hour. America really needs to remember their soft power, and that those dollars really are the most efficient dollars. Foreign policy, blue jeans, rock music, we need to get back to that.
Al, do you have an underreported story this week?
My underreported story of the week actually might come from the most overreported story this week, and that is the rollout of Apple's new gadgets for 2014 and 15 and beyond. Specifically, the iWatch. In the days leading up to the iWatch's introduction to the world, companies such as Movado and Swatch and others, and Tag Heuer, saw their stock prices and their values dip quite a bit. As a matter of fact, Swatch lost anywhere from $1.2 to $1.5 billion of value in one day. The current watch, as we know it, is being subsumed by companies such as Samsung, Sony, Apple, Microsoft, Google. And it's estimated that it's going to be a $10 billion a year industry by the year 2018. And now Apple's aboard. Now, mobile phones have been a wondrous tool for people. Folks don't have to worry about buying film anymore or going to a Rand McNally store to buy maps. You don't have to have checks at your local bank anymore because you can do all your payments by phone. You can even watch TV on them. And now the simple wristwatch seems to be the next thing that is going to be going by the wayside with that, which kind of makes you wonder if Apple's starting to act a little bit like Walmart.
I think I'll keep my watch.
Yeah, bring back the watch. All right, that's all we have time for this week. Thanks for watching The Square Circle, and we'll see you next week.